Hi team, good to see you. What's up? Now, here I am again, short time, proudly sponsored by Red Bull. No, not really, but hey Red Bull, if you're listening, that'd be good. Right. Picture this, you and your friends are having an absolutely fire house party. The vibes are immaculate. Everyone's having a great time. Supply and demand are perfectly balanced until your parents show up and start making rules. That's what we're talking about with regards to government intervention in a market. And before you click away, thinking this is going to be boring, stick with me, because understanding this might actually help you figure out why concert tickets cost you your entire soul and why your part-time job has a minimum wage. So let's get into it. Firstly, why do governments even bother? Right? Having to think about the different things. Why do governments even bother? Let's have a look. Right, all right, so first things first. Governments feel the need to interfere in markets. Can't they just let supply and demand do their thing? Well, not always, right? Here's the tea. Governments intervene for basically 7 main reasons. Number 1, they want that bag, aka income tax, all right? They can earn income tax revenue. They've got to fund the schools and the hospitals somehow. They might want to support firms. Sometimes businesses need a helping hand in order to survive and to grow. They might want to help low-income households. Okay, some households need that helping hand in order to survive or to grow. They might perhaps want to influence the level of production that there is, to influence the level of consumption there is. Like, say, they want less people smoking cigarettes or more electric car production. How about this one? Number 6. They might want to correct or fix a market failure. This is a big one, all right? Sometimes markets absolutely fumble. They create negative externalities like pollution, okay? How about this one? Promoting equity, all right? Making sure the wealth isn't just being concentrated with a small group of people, keeping things somewhat fair. Think of the government as that friend who sees the party getting out of hand. They step in before someone breaks something that's expensive. Except sometimes they're helpful, other times they might just kill the vibe. So let's have a look at the first intervention that governments can possibly do. This is a big one. Price controls. The government can actually control the prices, all right? So 2 ones, just 2, all right? You've seen them both. Here we go. Maximum prices, price ceilings. You can't go above the ceiling. This is what the government says. Oi, you cannot change more than that amount. Classic example, rent control. Imagine the demand for apartments in a super high demand for accommodation city. Maybe South Korea, maybe Seoul, South Korea. Imagine that. Maybe the government sets a maximum rent in place, okay? 800 won a month, when equilibrium may be actually 1,200 won per month. Sounds great for renters, but at that price, everyone's going to want to rent. Okay, there is high quantity demanded. But landlords, they're like, nah, not worth it. And maybe they supply fewer apartments, so a lower or reduced quantity supply. The result, shortage, yeah? Excess demand. You've got people who might have to queue for, I don't know, a long way in order to get an apartment. They might be literally fighting over apartments like it's the Hunger Games. Waiting lists might be longer than the queue for a new iPhone. So who wins? Maybe the people who actually get the apartment at that cheaper price. Who's going to lose? Everyone else who can't find housing, plus the landlords who make less money, income. There's also price floors, or what are called minimum prices. Okay, this is just the opposite. The government says you must charge a price higher, or at least at this level. So it must charge higher than that. It is the floor price. Can't go below the floor. The classic example is always a minimum wage. Let's say the market equilibrium wage is $8 an hour, but the government sets the minimum wage at $11 an hour. That's great for the workers who keep their jobs. They're earning more. Woo! All right? But people want jobs at that wage. So more people want them, higher quantities supplied, and they're more expensive. So reduced quantity demanded. The result, a surplus of labour, which is what we know of in economics as unemployment. And it's people, all right, who don't have their job. Why this happens? Well, it's because of the minimum wage, all right? Who's going to win, though? Those workers who keep their jobs at the higher wages. Who's going to lose? The people who don't have their job because they've lost it, because they're now too expensive, or they can't find the work despite wanting to get work. The government basically says, I'm setting the price. I'm the government in that situation, but they can't force people to actually trade at that price. They can't. All right? It's like your parents who say to you that you have to sell your old shoes for $50 in minimum. Doesn't mean anyone's going to buy them, but the government, in this case your parents, have said you have to sell them at that price. What else could the government do? All right, another intervention. Let's have a look. Indirect taxes and subsidies. All right, let's have a look. Next, the government subtle but powerful moves. Indirect taxes are taxes on goods, not on your income, which you might feel is good because they're on goods. All right, think VAT, value-added tax, excise taxes on cigarettes, alcohol, petrol, GST, goods and services tax, depending where you are. Here in Malaysia, SST, sales and service tax. When the government puts a tax on a product, the supply curve, it shifts left. All right? Why? Because it's going to cost them more. All right? The result, higher prices for the consumers and lower quantities being sold. So here's what you need to know for your exam. All right? The tax burden in those cases is shared between the consumer who wants to buy the product and the producer selling it. But who pays more of that tax burden depends on the level of elasticity. If the demand is more inelastic, so people need the product, then the taxes mean consumers will bear most of that tax. If demand is more elastic, then producers are going to end up paying more of that tax. So a real life example, cigarette taxes, they're a good one. People might be addicted to cigarettes, therefore the demand is more inelastic, okay? As the demand is inelastic, people have to buy it because they're addicted to it. Governments will tax them and the taxes can be quite big. Smokers will still pay for the cigarettes. It raises revenue for the government. It does maybe discourage smoking, but maybe not by as much as we might think. So kind of two birds, one stone. There are also the other one, subsidies, the other type of intervention, right? This is when the government is being generous, all right? This is the government giving money to a producer to encourage the level of production. So agricultural subsidies, renewable energy subsidies, the subsidy will cause the supply curve to shift right, all right? More is being produced because they're able to shift right. The cost has dropped. So therefore the prices for consumers will also decrease. Everyone's happy, except the taxpayers. They're the ones who are going to end up funding this. An example, real life example, here we go, solar panels and subsidizing the production of solar panels. The government wants perhaps more green energy, so they will subsidize solar panels. Producers are able, because of the reduced cost, to produce more solar panels, lowering the price. More people want to buy them, and we move more perhaps towards a sustainable, renewable delivery of energy and a perhaps more sustainable environment. But here's the thing, subsidies do cost actual money. And where does that come from? It comes from the taxation. So is it worth it? That's a policy debate. We need to evaluate both sides in our discussions, our essays perhaps, about whether this is an effective way for the government to achieve its objectives. What other interventions could we have? Other interventions. Direct provision. The government could actually provide the entire good or service themselves. They could set themselves up as a business selling that product, right? That good or service. In the UK, you'd think about the National Health Service or NHS. You might think about state or government-run schools, public transport in some countries, where the market isn't going to provide it fairly or provide enough of it, then the government will step in. Legislation, rules, regulations that the government might set up, all right? Might be product safety standards or product quality standards, might be environmental laws, right? You can't just sell whatever you want, all right? There are risks involved to the consumers and to the producers, all right? But there are risks involved, and the government will sometimes step in. Consumer nudges, all right? This is an IB, this is an HL only topic, but it is another form of intervention. This is where the government actually says, hey, look, we're not going to tell you can't consume the product. We're just going to nudge you. We're going to encourage you. We're going to have a subtle way to try and influence your choice without actually forcing you to do anything, like putting healthy food at an eye level in a school cafeteria, or making organ donation opt out instead of opt in. All right, so you're automatically registered as an organ donor, and you physically have to opt out. Right? That means it's going to be more difficult for you to do, so you're probably more likely to stay as an organ donor, etc. Choice architecture. Oh, awesome. Cool topic. Each of these different approaches of government intervention has their own strengths, has their own limitations. In your exams, you need to evaluate, not just describe. You need to think about how effective they are at solving whatever the problem is. You need to think about perhaps unintended consequences of those particular policies. Short and long-term effects are a good way of doing that. And maybe the impact on stakeholders, right? Not the people holding the stake, but the people who have a direct impact or a direct involvement and interest in the consumption or production of that particular product. So let us conclude. Here we go. Here's the big picture. Markets are generally efficient, but they're not perfect. Sometimes there's inequality. Sometimes we might need to provide public goods. Sometimes markets and businesses and industries will generate negative externalities. This will happen, like pollution. Government intervention is like that friend who tries to help. Sometimes they make things better. Sometimes they make things maybe not better. Maybe they create new problems. But your job as an economist is to analyze it objectively. Look at the data. Consider what the impact is on stakeholders. Weigh the trade-offs, right? Is the pollution on a scale of a 6 or a 7? Right? Sorry, had to do that one. Right, a quick exam tip. Here we go. When you are thinking about government intervention, you should be mentioning what is the problem that's being addressed. What method is being used to solve that problem? How does it actually work, the solution? Are there diagrams and models you can use to illustrate it? Who benefits from that and who might lose from that? Are there unintended consequences that might happen as a result? And give it an overall conclusion. How effective was it? Remember, there's not a perfect answer. Economics isn't about perfect answers. It's about trade-offs and consequences, the context of what you have to say. If this is helpful, if this has been helpful to you, all right, that's really good. I'm very pleased. But now you've got some work to do. Here's what I'd like, all right? Please hit the like button. It helps me, helps the algorithm. Subscribe if you haven't already for more economic content that doesn't put you to sleep. Drop a comment in the comment section about what you'd like covered in another video, all right? Please do that. Share this video with others who might need to know about it, all right? Otherwise, team, hei kōnera, have a good day. I'm out. Go and ace those exams. Bye.